Not all novels are the same as each other. You've probably read a few that stand out to you above the rest. Novels that you know are going to haunt you for the rest of your life, and novels that you might say have rewired your brain. But even though reading these novels feels like a magical experience, it's not magic. It's a writer's engineering. There are specific, observable, actionable details that you can include when you're writing your own novel in order to create a masterpiece that moves you and your reader. Let's start with the first touchstone and get absolutely clear on what we mean when we say writing a deep novel. So this word deep has a specific meaning, and one of the most simple ways to conceptualize depth is as dimension. You can imagine a jewel like a diamond, that if you held it up to the light and turned it, all the different facets of it would catch the light in different ways, and you could observe the dimensionality of this diamond's cut. Things with dimensionality have more than one side to them, and you can apply this principle of dimensionality to the characters and setting of your novel. With your characters, you can give them dimensionality by giving them multiple different sides, and you can create these sides by creating contrast and variety in the characters' attitudes and behavior. If your protagonist, for example, is a good and righteous person, show what circumstances they'll act dishonorably and break their own rules. If your character is kind and meek, show how they could lash out or be cruel or make a defiant stand. If a character is ruthless and cold-hearted, show or imply vulnerable moments of what they're desperately protecting, what they're afraid of, and what they'll grieve. Now, in your world building, if your setting is mundane and ordinary, look for the micro-worlds where it's breathtakingly beautiful. If the setting is soft and cozy, look for the face of it that is uncomfortable and disturbing. If the setting is hostile and depraved, as in a grimdark fantasy or an apocalyptic dystopia, look for the face of it that is tranquil and gentle, relaxed and peaceful. As you can imagine, not every story is going to be a deep story. Dimensionality gives a certain quality that isn't appropriate for every style or every story. And if you think I haven't given a complete definition of what a deep novel is, wait until the second touchstone, which will definitely cover what you think I've been missing. Now, we talked about deep characters and deep worlds, but what about deep plots? We could say that adding dimension to a story's plot involves giving it multiple different sides as well, by using subplots that revolve around the secondary characters and secondary goals. This is why people can sense that deep stories might require layered and interconnected subplots, but we'll talk more about that in the second touchstone. Now let's talk about another way to interpret the word deep that'll help us here. When things are physically deep, like a deep hole in the ground or a deep body of water, it means that there's a lot of space to move into. There's a lot of space to go. So when a novel is deep, it's because there's a lot to say. There's things about it, its characters, its plot, its world, that aren't immediately apparent and can't be gleaned from a cursory inspection, a first impression, or a surface glance. There are things that exist beyond the surface level. These hidden things aren't always hidden on purpose, but they're just not immediately apparent. As you spend time with the story, these things begin to reveal themselves, or they get revealed. So we can say that a deep plot has substance. Sometimes people will get feedback that they don't have enough plot to make a story, especially if whole chunks of the middle are just stretches of dialogue dragging on and on uselessly, and the characters are just having irrelevant conversations. One way to fix this is to remember and apply the most important thing about the mechanism of substance and dimensionality, which is do not give away the whole picture too soon. A novel has a lot of words, and it takes hours to read. Things that are in-depth take a long time. There's a lot to get into. There are contradictions that can only be understood over the course of the story. For example, in Chapter 1, we learn only a little bit about the characters and their world and the plot of the story, and by the end of Act 1, we know some more, but we still don't know everything. You only know everything about a novel when you finish reading the last sentence. The whole picture, the whole truth of the novel isn't apparent from the outset. You have to leave some things to be revealed. Give characters an opportunity to show their different sides. Let their efforts be successful and unsuccessful. Let them be right and then let them be wrong. or give them a streak of all wins or all losses, and build anticipation for what it'll be like when there's a final moment of triumph, or a final moment of downfall. When the middle of your story has an insubstantial plot, events just seem to be happening way too fast, or maybe it seems like there's nothing happening at all. It's one of those two cases. It could be because you have the characters being completely right, or have them grasping all of the answers way too soon in the course of the story. There's no struggle left, so there's no story to tell. Reveals and new information, whether to the reader or to the character or both, these are what are going to make up the middle of your story. And what I would argue is that they are even the primary mechanism which makes progress in the story happen. A deep novel isn't like a game of speed solitaire where you're trying to expose all the information as fast as possible so that you can strategize about how everything links together. It's more like in a game of Uno where you need to make sure that you have a card to play every time it's your turn, so that you don't have to draw cards and set yourself back from victory. Every chapter in your novel should have something to offer, something new to say or reveal, or correct about what's been said or revealed. When, as a reader, you can sense these contradictions, these problems, these holes and missing pieces in the picture that the author is trying to paint, that's when you know you're in for a deep story. Just be careful when you're writing that you're making the appropriate artistic choice for the vision of your work. So don't overdo things. It's crucial to know when enough is enough. You don't have to load every element of your story with dimension and substance. Maybe the protagonist isn't that deep in your case, but the plot is a truly tangled web, like in a detective story. On the other hand, maybe your plot is a tried and true romance or an epic fantasy hero's journey, but the cast of characters are where the depth is. They are richly drawn as individuals, and even more in their various relationships to each other are they very, very interesting. Don't uselessly add just whatever seems good. If there's nothing more to say, stop talking. If you're just playing and having fun, you can of course do whatever you like with your writing. But if you're trying to construct something specific, understand the means by which you'll actually achieve your goals. You can't do just anything and expect to get exactly what you want. So we have dimensionality and substance. Now the second touchstone is meaningfulness, and this is going to cover what many people will think of when they hear the phrase deep novel. The first way we can understand meaningfulness is as personal meaningfulness. People are different from each other. Novels are going to mean different things to different people. The story that changed your life and smashed open your worldview could mean absolutely nothing to the next person. Maybe it was just a pretty lukewarm experience for them and they're going to forget about it as soon as it's done. So what exactly makes something personally meaningful? It's emotional resonance. The word resonance means that there was a reverberation, there was an echo or a repetition between something inside of you and something outside of you. When a character or a situation resonates, it's because the emotional quality of it rhymes or almost rhymes with something that you felt or something that's happened to you. Something in the story plays out in a similar manner to your own emotions and experiences. And somebody else wrote that story that wasn't you, which means that somebody else knows, or at the very least has very accurately imagined the private little bubble of your personal reality. They're giving words to your psychological and emotional experience. And like the pure, clear sound of a tuning fork, that resonance shakes you, and qualitatively the story feels different. It means something. At least to you. You can probably guess that it would be pretty challenging to create something that would resonate with everyone, with each and every single person on this 8 billion person planet. So don't even bother aiming for that. For example, there was that multi-award winning film that came out a few years ago, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I actually watched that movie after it won its awards and when it went up on Netflix. I did not like it at all. I found it very boring. I'm not interested in the idea of exploring multiple different realities. And I'm not a person who experiences regret very painfully. I resonate more with other emotions. I mean, on the other hand, my favorite Disney princess is actually Elsa from Frozen, because I'm also an isolationist. I too would have really liked to live by myself in a castle and not talk to or see anyone, and just be by myself and enjoy my own creative powers. The relief and the liberation of self-exile, for me, that resonates. So think about the stories that have resonated with you. Not necessarily your favorite characters and stories, but the ones that resonated. There was at least a slice of them that resembles to some degree, at least some slice of you. Some way, somehow, you are seeing yourself. And it doesn't have to be complete and total resonance. Partial resonance works too. Maybe for you, what resonates is disappointment and disillusionment. Somebody working really hard for nothing in the end, or for something that it turns out they didn't even really want. Or maybe what resonates is the self-sacrifice of the classically heroic protagonists, or the vindication of a victim who persisted to eventually win their own justice. Now, to create emotional resonance, you need to include moments of emotion. If you happen to be familiar with the motivation reaction units, then you already know the specific place in which this happens. Also, you need to remember not to use broad emotions, but specific emotions. Get to the character's specific reactions. Two characters could have the same experience of betrayal, but one of them could react with sadness and withdrawal. The other one could react with fury and violence. Context informs these emotions too. Like the self-hatred of struggling to control yourself from doing things you already know are making your life worse and hurting the people you love. Or like the confusion and helplessness of finding out that you were being coldly manipulated. These emotional moments need to be built up to. There has to be a reason why they happen. If you're left-brained and a very analytical thinker, you'll probably be able to use a logic tree to arrive at these specific emotions. You'll be able to figure out the reason why these emotions happen. And just like in dimensionality, contrast is very useful here. The highs feel so high when the lows feel so low. Things only mean anything when they're contrasted against other things. Happiness all the time doesn't mean anything. Sadness all the time just becomes normal. Now, the second way to understand meaningfulness is as intellectual satisfaction. The opposite of meaningfulness is meaninglessness. And when you think of something meaningless, you might imagine something like emptiness, randomness, or disorder. For example, babbling words at random is meaningless speech, or scribbles on a piece of paper that are neither words nor pictures are meaningless. So meaning comes from order. When disorder is organized in a coherent way, then we have meaning. For example, human beings will make a story out of the events in their lives to see its meaning. The genre that particularly emphasizes intellectual satisfaction, this intellectual meaning, is mystery stories. Something mysterious happens, and there becomes an incomplete picture of the world. We want to know the whole picture. We want to know how this happened. Was it an accident? Was it done on purpose? And if it was an accident, how did all the dominoes line up to create this accident? But if it was done on purpose, who did it? How? And why? These unknowns represent disorder. And when you tell the story and reveal the answers, you're restoring order and completing the picture. You create order. You reveal meaning. The mechanism of intellectual satisfaction is one of the reasons people get the sense that a deep novel should have layered conflicts and interconnected subplots. Not only does layers and interconnectedness make substance, it brings out a very nuanced, lifelike meaning. Everybody knows that life is tangled up and complicated. So seeing this tangled upness in a story gives it verisimilitude, lifelikeness. Additionally, readers can notice and appreciate the sophistication of engineering on the part of the writer, and appreciate the story on that level too. Which is why you can make logic trees to arrive at emotional payoffs. One way or another, things need to add up. This is also why foreshadowing is very important. In speculative genres, especially like fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, where the rules of the world are invented by the author, and at times when there are shocking twists in your story, because they must never ever come from nowhere. If you already know about story structure, you can probably sense when these big moments of emotional resonance and intellectual satisfaction happen in a story. They hit the hardest at the midpoint, the break into the final act, and all throughout the finale. Having these as waypoints throughout your story makes seeing the path you have to take as a writer more clear. They're very useful on a practical level too. Now, the third touchstone of a deep novel is immersion. When something is immersive, it means that you can feel it all around you, like being immersed in water. Similarly, when you're psychologically immersed, You block out everything else, and whatever you're with is all that exists. So an immersive reading experience is one where the world of the story is happening all around you. You're drawn in and held in. The primary way to achieve this immersion is by appealing to the senses, the 5 physical senses. Writers will default to describing things that can be seen, so most people can do that very well. But don't forget to look for opportunities where you can include the other senses too. This is why we have the saying, show, don't tell. If there was only telling, what would be the difference between reading your novel and reading like a wiki summary of it? Outlines and planning are generally all telling. But when you show, you appeal to the senses and you can immerse the reader. That's why that's really important. And as a caution, there is a such thing as too much showing. If it's all showing, like every single sentence in your novel is all showing, that's not immersion, that's drowning. You are waterboarding your reader. They need to be able to come up for air. They need to be able to read telling sentences in between all the showing. In novels, showing and telling control the speed of the narrative experience. And showing slows down time in the world of the story, so that 1 minute for the characters could be 10 pages for the reader. You need to move the reader at a variety of speeds, intermittently showing and telling at different stretches. Ideally, you will slow down and dwell on the most interesting parts of the story, and not dwell on anything that's boring and unimportant. The secondary way to create immersion is to make sure that your prose is well constructed. This means that spelling, grammar, punctuation are all correct, and paragraph division makes sense. Sometimes a writer will have an underdeveloped authorial voice, and you know it when you see it because you're not drawn in by the prose. It's the kind of voice that maybe comes from understanding storytelling through TV shows and movies and visual media. And maybe this writer mostly reads on the internet in the style that people talk in posts and things like that. But maybe this person doesn't read so many books, so they're not very used to seeing written sentences. The things that throw a reader out of immersion can maybe be let slide once or twice, even in a published book. Just seeing a mistake like that, you might be able to let go once or twice. But as a reader, when you see too many of these, you start to feel that the writer is not trustworthy. And when I see that, I feel like I can't trust this writer to tell me a satisfying story, so I put the book down and I don't read anymore. So from my own observations and personal opinion, these are the 6 mechanisms that I think make a deep novel. And the point of articulating all of this was to give myself and anybody who might be like me a concrete standard to aim for and a set of guidelines to play by. This is the kind of book that I want to read, so this is the kind of book that I want to write. And I don't doubt that in the process I'll have to do a lot of course correction.